Actually, I had one lady drop a comment that said James Rowlett for president. So, James, I don't know if you got a political career, but there you go. All right, we are back, and today I am talking with James Rowlett from the Houston sales team down in Texas. So we did an interview a couple weeks ago. I wrote an Inman article on it, and it did really well. But the one thing we didn't talk about is the solution to the IDX reform that we talked about in the article. So I figured let's do a part two on this. Let's talk about solutions. So, but before we get into that, I want to kick it over to James and give him an opportunity to introduce himself.
Great. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Josh. So I'm James Rowlett. I'm a real estate agent with Compass Real Estate, the Houston home team, not sales team, which is good.
Oh,
But no, it's all good. No. So yeah, so I've been doing real estate for just over 9 years. I came from a oil and gas background. I'm originally an engineer. I did like subsea control systems for a big chunk of my career. And when oil imploded back in 2014, I survived to the end of 2015 and they finally cut my contract. And anyway, needless to say, after about 6 months, I realized I wasn't getting a job, just like thousands of others engineers across the state actually that were in this. Nobody was getting employed. So I said, you know what? I could get into real estate, sell some property, make some money to pay the bills. And next thing you know, my second year, I sold like 10.8 million, and here I am 9 years later, still doing it. So yeah, so nothing's changed.
yeah. Well, and I found James about a year ago, and it's funny because when we did the first interview, I said 2 years ago, and he corrected me and said, "No, I've only been doing this for a year." But I found him about a year ago on TikTok, and one thing that really resonated with me right away was the fact that he came from outside of real estate. And I think that's really important just because I think we need a lot more perspective than the people who have been in this industry forever, especially if we want to change things and make it better. I think stagnation has really hit this industry hard. And so I was really attracted to James's TikTok. If you're not following him, I highly recommend you check him out. At the end of this interview, I'm going to give him an opportunity to drop all his handles and everything. But like I said, we did an interview a couple weeks back. I wrote an article, and the outreach from that article was just absolutely phenomenal. But one thing we didn't talk about in the first one, well, it didn't get in the article, was that the solution. I had a bunch of people, actually, I had one lady drop a comment that said James Rowlett for president. So, James, I don't know if you got a political career, but there you go. Is it real quick? If you guys want more info, go read the previous article. But he's going to give you a quick rundown of what it is right here.
So yeah, so IDX is just pretty much if you are a member of an MLS, you can get IDX, which is information data exchange, which is all the data that's on the MLS. You can have it put onto your website. So people can search listings on your website, see what's for sale, see what's under contract. They could even see solds. It's an extension of the MLS. And when this was set up, it was meant to be a reciprocal type system to where it's like, Josh has listings, I have listings, he has buyers, I have buyers. So let's put it all together in one place so that way we can basically commingle. That's the whole point of IDX. It allowed us to share on each other's sites so we could put it out there for everybody. But the problem with it is IDX has been corrupted in the fact that what you're seeing now that's happening is portals are using it in a way that it was never meant to be used, which is effectively you've got companies that have no agents, they've got no listings, they have no buyers. They're just strictly using this as a means of advertising to skim a percentage of the money off of a transaction. And it was a reciprocal type arrangement is what IDX was meant for. And I don't think whenever, NAR and the MLSs really started going through this and they put in rules and policies that dictate how IDX is used, I don't think they thought this through for this scenario. And so now here we are with all these portals that are rising up that originally an agent, when they put a listing online, we used to get a lot of calls off of our listings online. Now the phones barely ring. You can have, like, I've got 5 listings right now. I haven't had a phone call in a week. You would think that I would get one call or at least a spam or something, but yeah, nothing's happening. And why is that? It's because the traffic has been redirected by portals to agents who are not me. And it's set up in such a way to where it's turned into a way of advertising the listing, but the consumer is unaware of the fact that when they reach out and they click a button that says contact agent, they think they're contacting me on my listing, but they're actually being sold off to somebody that's willing to pay that portal money for that lead. And that's the problem is like, so you have now taken a third party that's not an agent, that's not in the transaction whatsoever, but they've inserted themselves clean into it and they're skimming money off of it. And when people also talk about reduction in commissions, it's harder to reduce it when you have 40% of the commission on one side completely going out the window. So it's frustrating. And so it really is something that we should have looked at. And unfortunately, we didn't. And here we are. And nothing seems to be done about it either. That's the other part that's really frustrating.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting with my background in lead generation. We've been doing, IDX type stuff for a long time, but it wasn't really till I started talking to or listening and following you that I really kind of started putting the pieces together about how non-agent type people were leveraging agent information, and the really the overall consequences of that, I think, are what's really interesting. And you brought up a really good point about, with some of these portals charging huge referral fees, and then we're saying, well, it's hard to reduce the agent commission because this is, basically off the top. I think it's right, like you said, it's just one more hand in the pot. So I think it's really interesting. I think the big issue, and one thing we talked about with this whole IDX, excuse me, is the unintended consequences of it that we're starting to see now. And I do think that the big lawsuit from a couple years ago really put a magnifying glass on the industry. And the good part about it is there were a lot of things that came out that I think are a lot more transparent now, not only to agents, but also to the public. And I kind of see IDX reform as kind of the next battleground, for lack of a better term, that I think agents and the industry as a whole needs to really look at to make the industry stronger, first of all, and really truly make it a lot more transparent. Because I think on the consumer side, a lot of the consumers have no idea what's going on with these portals. And I talk to consumers every day that think when they book a showing on Zillow that they're getting the listing agent. And so, and it's not just Zillow, it's all the portals. Everybody's doing it. So I don't want to pick on one company here, but it's definitely an issue. So, James has some amazing solutions to this, and that's really what we want to focus on. We talked in the first interview about how we got here, but I think the more important thing is how do we fix this? We can't go back in time and change it, but I think we can fix it moving forward, so it benefits everybody. So, James, let's talk solutions. What do you got?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's like, and they're not amazing. They're simple. That's the part. They're not. There's nothing amazing that I'm saying. It's just simple. And number one is when you go back, like NAR has a policy in place that talks about an agent when they have a listing, they can't put their contact information in the public remarks. They can't put their name in the public remarks. They cannot watermark their photos. They can't show a picture of the sign in the yard in their photos. And the reasoning behind it, when you actually read into the policy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a couple of years since I read this, but it's like I haven't gone back to look at it. But I swear to God, it said that it is a privacy issue. It's a concern for privacy, which I'm like, you tell me what real estate agent who is actively buying and selling homes is concerned about their personal privacy. It's like, golly gee, I hope they don't know what my name is. It's like if you offered me a billboard on I-10, with a picture of me going, call this jackass with two thumbs, like I said before, if you said, hey, we'll give that to you for free, I'm like, done. No agent that's doing business is concerned about their privacy. This game is about relationship. This game is about people knowing who you are. This is helping you to build business and also to sell listings. It allows you to get in front of a lot of people. You want a large audience. So there is no agents that are concerned about privacy. But when you look at it, the fact that that is in place, whenever I have a portal, what are two of the main things that people do whenever they go on a portal to look at a listing? First, they look at the photos. Well, if you're looking at the photos and you're trying to monetize this listing to where I can sell it off as a lead to somebody by capturing that buyer's information, if they go on the photos and it had a picture of me on there with my sign, they might go, oh, that's the guy. I'll just call this 832-545. They just dial me in. Or if they're in the public remarks and it says, hey, interested in this property, give me a call today. Call James Rowlett at 832-545. They're just going to do that. It circumvents their process of being able to sell this as a lead. And that's where it's come. And the fact that it still exists as a rule and now it just feels like it's more about trying to protect the ability for portals to sell this off, but it comes from rules from NAR, from the MLSs that also enforce rules like this. And you have to remember, who's the consumer? Who is the person that they are the business that they're getting transacting with? It's the person that pays you. NAR's paid by real estate agents. The MLSs are paid by real estate agents. They're not paid by portals, at least not on the scale. Or if they are, we don't know about it. So
Yeah.
that could be a total problem altogether.
Yeah.
So, but it makes no sense. So why in the world would you leave a rule in place that benefits portals but hurts the agents? It makes absolutely no sense. So the ability to actually publicly put your information in the public remarks, to watermark your photos, to have a picture of your sign in there, do it because that would change everything. You're like, yeah, but that's not fair because, they could circumvent the whole system of what? A portal? Yes, exactly. They could circumvent a portal. Someone that's giving information that is not following the reciprocal rules of what IDX was intended to be. And I have no problem with that. Now, the other issues that you see from this is I feel like some of the stuff just is abused and throwing NAR under the bus a little bit again, but in the MLSs, I feel like they turn a blind eye to some of the rules in here that they hurt us and they just don't seem to care. And I don't know why. I mean, I've got my suspicions why. I mean, it's 9 times out of 10, when something doesn't make sense, it's typically money that's inserted. And when you insert money, everything makes sense. So I don't know because they have two things that, as far as I'm concerned, they're supposed to do, as far as the National Association of Realtors is. Number one is consumer protection, and number two is agent advocacy. Now, if you're doing something that's not necessarily good for the consumer, possibly hurting the consumer, and number two, it hurts agents, why are we doing it? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Those are your two directives. So I don't get it. I truly don't get it. Now I can go to the next part, which would be a totally different rule, unless you want to interject something. So
No, I just think that's great. And what's weird is I've been in this industry now almost 10 years. And I've never understood that whole why the MLS wouldn't allow us to, put that information in. And I don't know, maybe back in the day, I think when this IDX stuff started, I wasn't in real estate. And so who knows? I don't want to speak for anything back in the day, but I agree with you. I don't understand how this is a privacy issue when, like, in my opinion, for the most part, if you're listing homes, you're pretty much a public figure and you want to be a public figure. And so, I've never understood why that whole thing. And I think here's the thing too. And I talked to somebody else about this, and they were like, "Well, if we did this, it would absolutely tank the portals." And I don't think that's the case because I think ultimately, even if you allowed, branding within the photos, name, phone number in the remarks, there's still going to be people that click the little button, and the portal's not going to go away. I think I see this as we're just evening the playing field. We're giving agents an opportunity to market their listings and have a potential to catch the client. What the client does is totally up to them. But I think right now, part of the problem I have is the clients don't even have a choice with the portal because we can't brand the photos, we can't put that contact information. And I think you're going to talk about this, but also the way that these portals are displaying the listing agent information, let's just say it's pretty well hidden. I mean,
it's fine.
so, but let's jump. Yeah, what's the next solution you got?
So yeah, so one thing is one of the other rules. If you look at the way IDX is used and displayed on other sites, they have a requirement that the font size for the listing office, the agent, and the contact information for them, phone numbers, emails, they have to use the median font on the page, which means if I've got 3 fonts, it would be the second largest font. If I've got 5 fonts, it would be the third largest font. And if you start going into these pages and looking at it, it is not uncommon for them to have upwards of 9 different font sizes. So now you may ask yourself, well, what do font sizes 6, 7, 8, and 9? What's their purpose? I'm like, not much. They just have some very small script on there, disclaimers. It's almost like it's like, let's find something for you to do. Okay, you can be a few words down over here. There's no reason for them, but why did they do that? It's because the median font, which would be the fifth largest font, that's the stuff that they use for the listing agent's information, their office name, and their contact information, assuming that they actually show it all. Because
Yeah,
in theory, you only have to show the brokerage that's listing it, and you don't have to show the agent's name. Now, I will give that credit to the portals. They usually do show the agent's names, and it's some of the brokerages that fail to show the agent's names. So that rule, though, whenever you said, well, a median font, you're like, no, this goes back to, like I said, on my engineering background, I've talked about like HAZOPs and stuff. You identify what are the potential problems that we just don't even see. It's like all the way to the point of a madman running into a control room, punching buttons that shouldn't be there. I mean, somebody doing something they're not supposed to do. Nobody sat down and had a spitball session where they were shooting spitballs at this thing going, what about this? Well, what about this? What about this? I think they go, you know what, the median size font, that sounds good. And I get it. That's what they did. But they didn't think through of, oh, well, what if somebody wanted to abuse this? You go, oh, wait, that's something different.
Yeah.
You're at a point now when you have tech companies getting into this, their value system versus the ethics that are in place for real estate, something totally different. So when you start looking at large corporations, it's funny, Joe Rogan said this one time and he nailed it perfectly. He said, if I could assign a personality type to a corporation, it would be a psychopath. And
Yeah.
that's perfectly true. Everything's about the bottom line. It's about serving the shareholders. I don't care who I hurt. What do I do? It's all about that bottom line. And I'm going to do what I got to do to make that money.
Yeah.
And where in real estate, you're like, well, is that ethical? It's like, well, a corporation doesn't say, is it ethical? They say, is it legal?
Yeah.
We have ethics. They just have legality. We have that. We got that too. But you know what I mean? The ethics of it takes it to another level.
Yeah.
And from a corporate level, they don't have the ethics that you would have in real estate. It's like you're not supposed to speak badly about another real estate agent. But yet, if you see some of the documents that they've come out with on some of the portals, they're even willing to say, you know what, we're going to embarrass real estate agents if they still stay at brokerages we don't agree with. I'm like, you could never say that as a big brokerage. If a CEO for a large brokerage said that, you're toast.
Yeah.
We don't operate that way. So it's weird that they're doing this, and we have to take that into consideration. So it's one of those things of people never thought about how could they abuse it whenever they put these rules into place. But the fact that they're being abused, we're still not looking into it. And that's why we got to step it up. So another way to actually stop this, and this is the big one to me, is they're putting a button that says contact an agent, or it typically says contact agent. And as the assumption is like, you're thinking that you're contacting the listing agent as the consumer. Now, at the end of the day, did the consumer really care? Usually not, but they do think that they are contacting the listing agent. And so when they click that button, it gets rerouted to somebody that's willing to pay for a lead. Or if they click the schedule a tour button, it gets rerouted to somebody that's paying for a lead. And some of them will even have times assigned on it. If you start going in some of these listings, you can't just pick a time like that. A lot of times there are properties based on the requirements of the seller that you've got to have a pre-approval letter or a proof of funds letter before you can even book a showing on that property. But yet you're giving these people, the consumer, this idea of, oh, that's a cool looking house. I want to go see it. Oh, it's open at 10 a.m. Click. They think they're seeing it at 10 a.m. And then they're going to get a call off of this. If they were actually communicating with the listing agent, they click it and then they go, well, no, you got to have a proof of funds or you've got to have a pre-approval letter. Whenever you get assigned off to some other agent, they're like just chomping at the bit because their phone just magically rang. And like, yeah, I'll be showing that to you tomorrow at 10 a.m. because they're excited over a $1 million prospect.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's false hope for the consumer versus if you would have called the listing agent goes, hey, okay, yeah, I'm happy to show that to you, but, and then when the but gets explained to you, you go, oh, yeah, I'm not that far along in the process.
Yeah.
That's the thing is it treats the consumer poorly, but the other part of it is you are taking away a lead from the agent who went out and hustled and got this listing out there and they're advertising it. The one person that knows everything about the listing is the one person that the consumer does not get to talk to.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So so one of the big rules, and this is the simplest one to me, I feel like, and this is the one that's going to piss everybody off, is this says contact agent button, and you put a button on there that says to contact an agent, it contacts the listing agent.
Yep.
What if answer buts? If it says schedule a tour, it contacts that listing agent to schedule a tour. That's
Yeah.
it. And you're like, well, I wouldn't put the buttons on there. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Don't.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's what it has to do. It's no more deceptive practices, no more redirecting the consumer, tricking them. It's we've already got a bad enough impression of what we are as real estate agents with the public. We Why does it happen? It's like because you have stuff where you make them chase their tail and they push them in circles, and it's like, oh, well, I thought I was talking to a listing agent. It's like, oh, well, I thought that it was open. I could just schedule to go see it. That's the other thing is too is a lot of the portal activity has turned this into a gratuitous type, instant excuse me, I guess it's instant gratification is what I meant to say.
Yep.
It's instant gratification. I decided I want to go buy a new home. I'm sitting here eating ice cream at 2 a.m. on my couch, surfing the web, and you're like, oh, that looks cool. Oh, schedule a tour. Boom. 10 a.m. I'm going to go see it. And you're like, yes. And then you finish your Haagen-Dazs and you go to bed. And then the next morning, some guy's blowing your phone up. And he's like, yeah, we're getting this set up. And he's jumping through hoops to show you a 10 a.m. A home at 10 a.m. No buyer consultation set up. No buyer representation agreement signed. They are going to meet you at that house, and that house is the place where all that's going to take place.
Yep.
So, as a consumer, if you knew that the portals were using your home as the first meeting point between a buyer and their potential new agent to explain the whole buyer representation agreement to them to actually try to win them over, they're not there to sell your home. They're there to land a new client.
Yeah.
How messed up is that? And if the consumer actually understood that's what's happening on this, they're not going to be too keen to have, these portals directing people to go see their house at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
They
You
don't
know,
think that way, though. They just think, oh, well, yeah, that's a buyer. It's like no, this is a buyer consultation. This isn't even a buyer. This is a meeting between an agent and a buyer trying to see if I can win them over to work with me.
yeah. Well, and I think I want to step back just a little bit to what you said too, because I think you brought up something interesting. It's not just the portals, because what we're seeing is brokerages are now basically taking a page from the portals and
Totally.
they're kind of using the same type of tactics, for lack of a better term, to try to even the playing field. But once again, I would make the argument that by brokerages doing that, they're also screwing over their own agents because they're not even giving their own agents, they're redirecting the traffic to their in-house lead gen departments, which then the brokerages are taking referral fees off of. So that's the thing. Like, I don't think this is an isolated incident just to the portals, but now we have brokerages that are playing ball. Um, so I think that's interesting. You know,
I've told you this before. My Game of Thrones analogy is what is on
yeah,
it. Real estate agents hate the portals because, well, excuse me, I should say real estate agents hate the portals because it just irritates them and they lose business to it. Brokerages also hate the portals, but they hate them for a different reason. It's the portals came up with an idea that they're using to skim money off of deals that they didn't come up with. And if they can upend those, they could assume the same spot. So it's like the Iron Throne in Game of Thrones. It's like it's who's going to sit on the throne out of the seven kingdoms. So it's the big fight over this. And that's what it is about trying to change this for the brokerages, but they want to get the portals out of the way so maybe they could actually do this exact same type of model. But for the agents, that doesn't help you at all. My idea here is why are we talking about an iron throne? What do you say we just melt it down and there is no throne?
yeah. Well, and I think too, the other thing that you said, is that putting contact the listing agent would piss a lot of people off. And my argument to that is, okay, if that's going to make you mad, how about this? Let's put two buttons up there. Let's put contact listing agent and contact buyer's agent. That way, consumers have the choice. If they want to contact a buyer's agent and have representation, because I've heard that argument, well, by forcing them to go to the listing agent, then there's dual representation and all that type of stuff. Okay, great. Why don't we give the consumer the choice of do you want to talk to the listing agent or like there's so many ways to deal with this that would fix it and at least even the playing field because that's how I see this. I don't see this as a thing for me personally. I don't think we need to shut down any portals. I don't think we need to do this. I think it's let's even the playing field and let's give the consumer the option on that. So I absolutely love that idea where either I would say if we're gonna do anything, yes, to the listing agent. But if we really have a problem with that and you really have a big issue because you're mad because you're a buyer's agent that relies on Zillow leads or whatever, um, just put two buttons up there. Let the consumer decide who do you want to talk to.
Right.
Um, you know, and the other thing, like I can speak early in my career. I was a Zillow agent, premier agent program, buying leads. And the number of people that I showed up and did a showing to that thought I worked for Zillow was astronomical because
Yeah.
consumers, especially first time home buyers, which predominantly are the ones that are using Zillow and that type of stuff, or people who haven't bought in a long time, that's your clientele. They don't understand the system. And I think I totally agree with you. And I'll be honest, there's been times, like when I was a Zillow agent, that it was like, hey, let's do the consultation at the house because I've got this call. Now, I was of the opinion I was always honest when I would call the listing agent and I'd say, hey, I need to be honest with you. These people are not pre-approved yet. Your sellers need to know that when they make the decision if they're okay with it or not. I was always honest about that because I didn't want to displace sellers for no reason.
Yeah.
And that was years and years ago. And I've learned my lesson. I don't really necessarily do that anymore because I'm not doing Zillow leads. Um, but most consumers don't understand that a lot of that is happening too. And so that's where I think ultimately a lot of this comes down to consumer advocacy, which is what, NAR, that's kind of one of their main
Absolutely. That's
goals.
the number one goal. Number
So
one.
like we're tying this whole thing back to consumer advocacy. Let's go get that. Let's go, let's go help them out.
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting that the consumer, like you said, they do not actually understand the process of this on the portals. They think the consumer, which when I say a consumer, I'm talking about as a real estate agent, as a buyer or a seller. When they're on the portal sites, they think they're still the consumer and they don't get that they're not the consumer. They're the product.
Yeah.
And the buyer is a product. The person selling their home is the advertising, and the
Yeah.
consumer is the agent. And once you understand that's what the model is, because you're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, a consumer always pays money to the business. Who's the person paying the money to the business? In this scenario, it's the real estate agent every time.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, but they're like, yeah, but I am paying and I'm buying a house and they're going to make compensation, commission, whatever you want to say. Yes, indirectly, but at the end of the day, these sites are not free. And I'm not saying that they necessarily have to go straight up that it's I don't know on disclosure and stuff like that. If you're paying for leads and a percentage of it's going back, and also you're bringing an in-house lender and all that crap. Yeah, there is ABAs that all real estate brokerages have. When you have in-house services, you're tied to a lender, you're tied to a title company. You've got an ABA that your client is signing that says, hey, these are affiliated businesses with us.
Yeah.
And you need to know that we do get moolah off of this. And so those types of disclosures don't happen. And I think that's one of the things you see EXP where they're saying, we're going to start disclosing referral fees and stuff like that. I'm like, that's a good step.
Yeah.
Uh, but the thing is the consumer has absolutely no clue what's going on here. And I don't think they even understand the amount of money that's being skimmed off the deal.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
and
No clue.
no, and I mean, just for like, if there's any consumers listening to this, just for over the last 18 months, I've been doing a lot of consulting for lead generation systems for large mega teams around the country. And I can tell you quite a few large mega teams that their monthly Zillow bill is in the six figures. So, like, this is big money. The consumer, buyer and seller, is not really the consumer to Zillow. Most of their money is made from real estate agents. And that comes into a whole nother thing about, business math and what we're doing in real estate, but that's for a whole nother topic. But it's not uncommon. And now what we're seeing, Zillow is transitioning to referral platform basically, where it's a 40%. In some markets it does vary, but we're talking 30 to 40% referral fee, that just because Zillow connected you with that agent, they're taking 40% of that commission right off the top.
Not just that,
And
but they've also got a home to sell as well. They're taking part of that too.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
and it ties them in for 2 years. I mean,
Yep.
people have no idea what type of leverage they have because a lot of times, the commission is negotiable. And if somebody hits you up and says, hey, I'm going to be buying a new home and I got to sell mine, hey, can we do some horse trading here? And I'm like, absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm happy to write that in. But if you're being connected off of somebody that's already taken 40% off of both the buy and the sell, you don't have much wiggle room at that point because your brokerage is expecting a piece of it too.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, that's why we stopped doing Zillow because it got to a point where when we first started, it was really reasonable to buy a zip code and it got so expensive that it took away my ability to negotiate commissions and do this, that, and the other thing to remain profitable. And so I was just like, it lost its, I'm like, part of the reason I want to do this is I want to negotiate as a business owner to be profitable, but also to be able to benefit my clients. And by working with Zillow, I lost that ability because their pricing went up so much. And so
Right.
I really truly believe now, part of this is going to go into the business ethics of real estate. But I truly believe if we make it where these portals have to compete and even the playing field, the consumer is the one that's going to win. Because what we're going to see is agents that are willing to negotiate and know how to negotiate are going to be able to retain that business. The consumers are going to get better pricing across the board.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and well, and this goes back to also when you go back to like I know I rip on NAR all the time, but they if they would have set up from day one when the internet came out and they saw all the stuff going online, why didn't they say to themselves, a national MLS, this makes sense. Why did they not do that?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And I was talking to a real estate agent yesterday in Boston. She's a broker in Boston. She was calling me up with an issue because, I will tell you, being on TikTok, I get all kinds of people calling me from all over the place. So they think I know a whole lot more than I do. And sometimes but a lot of times I'm just like, I'm just some dude sitting in his house making TikTok videos and I sell real estate in Houston. That's pretty much it. But she's sitting there and she calls me up and she's like, I've got these issues. I've got, our MLS is this and blah, blah, blah. And as she's talking to me, I started thinking, and I was thinking about it. And I've actually directed a couple of other agents. I go, hey, I want to show you something. Go on HAR.com, which is the Houston Association of Realtors.com. That's the forward site to the consumer from our MLS. She opened it up, and it's just as good as any portal site you will see. You can create your own account, you can save it. It shows all the agent information. She's like, "What the hell?" She's like, "I'm here in Boston. We look like AOL dial-up. I mean, it's like horrible what she's looking at, And she's like, "Why do we not have something like this?" And I go, "I don't know." And I'm not tooting my own horn, but I am. HAR.com is possibly one of the greatest forward-facing MLSs in the nation. And when you look at it, you're like, why is my MLS not like that? And here's the other part of it is our MLS has made a deal with Austin, a deal with Dallas Fort Worth, and a deal with San Antonio, where we have a reciprocal agreement where we can show each other's listings on it. Now, their MLSs, their forward sites are nowhere near what HAR is, but you can come on HAR and now look at Dallas Fort Worth stuff. So you're on a Houston website looking at homes for sale in Dallas or homes for sale in San Antonio, miles ahead of what they've got out there. And
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time that you will have all the MLSs within Texas make this agreement with HAR to show up on it. And what is that? That will be a state MLS effectively that the consumer can see. And it shows the listing agent's information. It shows their names, their phone numbers, their emails. You can click and contact them. You can click and set up a tour. It's already there and it could happen in Texas. And
Yeah.
but the problem still goes back to the MLSs. There's money in the MLS. I get it. The people that founded it, they're like, yes, but this is my baby and you're taking it away from me. I go, I know. So maybe you need to be brought along for a ride on this. But honestly, what if we can't make a national MLS? Why couldn't we take what's going on with HAR.com and make it would be an extension of MLS.com. So whatever your state is, you use your acronym. So Texas, it would be TX MLS, South Dakota, SD MLS. So it's SDMLS.com. The consumer knows that, hey, I'm looking to buy a house in California. So it's CAMLS.com. I go on there, all the listings are there. It's got all the
Yeah.
listing information it's got the information for the agents, the brokerages, their contact information. And it's crystal clear, like perfectly clean. You know who you're talking to. Why couldn't we do that? And like I said, not to plug for my MLS, but it is. Go check out HAR.com and you'll be like, why am I still rubbing two sticks together trying to make fire? Because
Yeah.
we're sitting here in Houston with a Zippo and you're like rubbing sticks. I don't know what to
Yeah.
tell
Well, and the other thing that I think about that too, and So I actually talked to an agent recently who's in Canada. Canada has a nationwide MLS, and she was saying that, the portals up there really don't have much leverage. They really don't. They're around. Zillow's in Canada, and, I think Homes.com is up there, but they just don't have the pull that they do. And she was pretty sure that it was because they have a nationwide MLS. And the other thing that she said that was really interesting to me about a nationwide MLS is if she has a client who's relocating, it's very easy for her to help that client search other parts of the country because she has access to all the information. And she
Absolutely.
can easily reach out to agents to find referrals and all that type of stuff. And that's one issue like I have that I really like. A nationwide MLS system just because if I'm helping a client relocate, if we have a nationwide system where I can pull up homes in Houston and I can look at those, not having to go through a portal, but actually have MLS access to homes in Houston, I can much better help my client before I even put them in contact with an agent down there. And so I think like that's another great idea that I really think could, once again, we're helping the consumer, we're
Absolutely.
helping
Yeah.
agents. So we've got the two consumer advocacy, agent advocacy. Those two things are done with a nationwide MLS. I do think you've got a lot of logistics that would have to be figured out. But I mean, let's face it, how many nationwide portals do we have? There's people that know how to do this, there's tech guys that can build these things out. Um,
Not as difficult as they think too, because people go, so let's say that an MLS, when you're looking at, say that there are 50 fields, like in Texas. I've got 50 fields that I show, but in South Dakota, they're like, hey, well, five of those we don't show. But so that means you've got 45 of the same 50 though. But you have three that we don't have. So you've got 48, I've got 50, but we have a common 45. But if we go through and add all these up across the nation, we may end up to where it's like, hey, it turns out that the majority, 50 states, 38 of the same fields off of this, and then we got 20 toggles,
yeah.
additional fields that some share and overlap on different states. And all it is it's toggling it on and off. Is it shown in that state or not? And if it's not allowed to be shown, you toggle it off. And it's a very simple platform setup. This is not difficult.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, this
another
is
thing that
not
I
difficult.
Another thing that I think a lot of consumers don't understand because they don't see the MLS is there's very few MLS like companies in the country. You have a few one-offs, but really, I think you got three or four like MLS companies that have like 95% market share
Right.
of, the system that runs the MLS. It's very similar. I mean, the system we use in South Dakota is the same system I used in Oregon. Same
Yeah.
exact thing. The fields, like you said, are different, but the system itself is the same. So that's where I think actually integrating these systems into a nationwide system, you're going to have some one-offs and stuff, and I'm sure you're going to have some resistance, but I think it's not going to be that difficult. And I do think ultimately the consumer is the one that wins. The agents win. I think, yes, the portals might lose, but once again, I'm gonna ask the question. There's nothing that even with a nationwide MLS, it's going to stop a portal. It's not anti-consumerism.
Right.
The portal can still operate under the same thing, but we're just even in the playing field.
Yeah. Well, and it still goes back, like I said, the rules of IDX. The idea was it was a reciprocal agreement that, it was so that we could share each other's listings with each other. That
Yeah,
was the whole point. And I'm like, but you don't have any listings.
yeah,
So why do you have IDX? Because you're gaming the system, and that's what it comes down to. And if people are, and there's people that are like, well, if these portals are taking away that business, just work harder. And I'm like, but if you're talking about 40% of it, where I used to sell three houses, I now have to sell five to make the same amount of money.
yeah.
How
Or you jack your prices up.
Yeah. And then that means, or, but you're like, okay, well, that's fine. That's not that much. But you're like, okay, well, fine. Let's go ahead and take it to where you're saying, like a producing agent that does 30 homes a year. It's like, well, now you need to sell 50 homes a year to make just the same amount of money. But now you're like, well, just work harder. I'm like, yes, but the attention that you're giving to your client is going away because of a third party pulling this off from a tech level. And you're like, just ignore that and work harder. There are so many people that say that. And nine times out of 10, when they tell you that, if you look them up, they're paying for leads. They
Yeah.
are massive teams. They are paying tens of thousands of dollars a month to these portals to get leads. And So you're like, yeah, everybody has an agenda, obviously, and that's the problem. It's like, don't be naive thinking, well, everybody's, it's like, I don't do this out of the goodness of my heart. I do
Yeah.
make a living. I got two kids in college. I got a wife and a house. And, it's like, thank God the third kid, she's taking care of herself. She's moving to Florida this year. But yeah, I do this to make a living. And it's like, and you can't fault somebody for making money, but to say that, well, you just got to go ahead and give it all up because it's all about the consumer at the end of the day. I'm like, yes, it is about the consumer, but it's also about the agent. And
Yeah.
the agent has to have the ability to make a living. And just saying to work harder because of this, because somebody is gaming the system, it's like, this is our organization that represents us,
Yeah.
and we're the ones paying to fund it. And I'm not talking just NAR, I'm talking about the MLSs. I'm talking about tech, like here, Texas Realtors. I am paying them to represent me. Why are you
Yeah.
doing shit that's actually hurting me?
Yeah. Well, and there's always going to be external threats in any business, and I get that. The problem I have with this is this feels more like it's an internal threat. And, that's where I'm like, wait a second, hold on. Like, I pay my dues, to these people. Why aren't you protecting me? And at least, once again, make it even. You don't have to say get rid of the portals. That's fine. Like, I think consumers are owed that option. I think people need choice. I think ultimately choice is what, helps everything. But let's like not give them an advantage that I don't get as a paying member of these MLSs and, NAR and all that type of stuff.
Right. And that's the problem is I don't know, it's not clear. Are they paying into these MLSs? It's like because there's strange things that happen that you're like, wait a minute, that's not helping the consumer and it's hurting agents. Why would you do that unless there was money involved? They do things that make no sense. And then that always leads me to question what's going on, which again, that goes back to they keep saying I would say the buzzword for 2025 and 26 is transparency. They
Yep.
keep saying that over and over and over. And I would say there is a complete lack of transparency on these relationships. Things don't make sense.
Yeah.
It just, it's frustrating.
And
So
that's where I
yeah.
truly think transparency and accountability are how we fix this industry. And I think that regardless, there's very few entities involved at any point in the process where there's a lot of transparency. And I can say that, I think there's very few portals, there's very few MLSs, there's very few brokerages, there's very few agents that have transparency with, all the people that they should be serving. And I think if we had transparency, then we could hold people accountable. And I really think it's one of those things where transparency, almost in its own, is almost a form of accountability.
Yes.
And that's why I think if we get the transparency, it's a really good start. And then we figure out, okay, what's the accountability side of it? But I think those two things, that's how we fix the industry. And I really see this as like, this isn't just an IDX issue. This is a real estate issue. And we talked about it in the first interview a little bit, but the ramifications of not fixing this is that real estate turns into a much different animal where, you know, consumers no longer have choice and you have one or two companies that
Right.
employ all the real estate agents and then consumers are just hosed. And that's where I think we need the transparency, keep everything even because I think it keeps the consumer protected instead of just having one or two big companies that control the whole stinking thing. So,
That's my
yeah,
Godzilla thing that I talk about. How do you fight a monster? With another monster.
yep,
The problem is because of the way the rules have been laxed or left in place and not necessarily revised, you've allowed these entities, these portal entities, to start skimming money off the industry. And how do you fight it? Well, you start consolidating the brokerages, which is kind of what you're seeing with Compass. And yeah, full disclosure, I'm a Compass real estate agent. Yeah, you're seeing it. They just completed the merger with Anywhere, 340,000 agents. It's one of those things of you start becoming a force to be reckoned with. And that's how you fight it. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, if Compass does this and then Remax, Keller Williams, EXP, if all of a sudden they said, gosh, maybe we should do this, they start merging into other things. And next thing you know, it's not just consumer choice. It is the consumer, as in the agents being a consumer. You don't have a choice on how you do business. The mom and pop brokerages, the one-offs, you suffer. You no longer can do business the way you want to do it because these brokerages become mega brokerages. And we could even see a breakdown of the way MLS is currently being done because if I have 40, 50% of the listings or whatever under one roof, why do I need your MLS? I'll just create an MLS and this is where they all go.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden we're starting to go backwards to where it's fractured MLSs across the nation. So the consumer can't just go to one site. They got to go to multiple sites to see all the inventory in Houston or anywhere in South Dakota, whatever it is. You're going to have to go to multiple sites to see everything.
Yeah.
How's that helping the consumer?
Which the exact opposite of how IDX was supposed to be. So,
Right. But it kind of protected the agent, but then it didn't protect the agent. And it's just, this goes back to we have national leadership that's not doing this thing called leadership.
yep.
That's why they're there. And the forced, that's the other part. It's like when they talk about, well, you had it's basically forced membership. We are, by, doing the Trinity type thing. When I join the local MLS as a realtor, I goes to the state and then they pay the national. I get that because real estate agents is like herding cats. A couple million 1099 employees that just, I got to go do this. I'm an independent contractor. And you're like, hey, you're an agent, I'm an agent, whatever, like I don't really care if I'm called a realtor or not, but then we created this organization that does go to bat for us, and it started with good intentions, but it's lost its way.
Yeah.
And now it's just not even helping us out. And then also when you see a threat to the way agents even do business, and it's also not going to be good for the consumer because long term, if you allow a corporate run, basically a tech company run a portal and change the way you do this, it's like open doors, I think, where they really want this to go to where all of a sudden it's like, hey, you want to sell your house? This is what you get for it. You may have two or three corporations that offer to pay you for your house, and then you wait for another house to come open. And when that house comes open, you're like, I want to buy that one. And they're like, this is the price. You're like, well, will they negotiate? No, but we'll lower the price in 28 days.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? There's no more negotiation. And this is how real estate is done. It's very hands off on customer service. It's much more waiting. And if you're telling me that they're going to be working for 4 to 6% of the cost of the home, think again. Tell me what corporation doesn't want to make at least 15%.
Yeah.
It's a
Exactly.
fully different model. You're like, but guess what? You don't have to pay a commission no more. You're like, when that happens, yeah, the price is going to skyrocket. It will change when you go to a corporate takeover of real estate, a true corporation doing this, really with not much agents involved. The cost to transact a home is going to massively shoot up. I guarantee it'll be 2 to 4 times more.
Yep. Yeah. So, well, I think we're going to end it there for this one. James, thank you very much. Super, super appreciate it. Real quick, where can people follow you? Where can they find you? Drop all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's James Rowlett, Houston Realtor. If you look me up, I come up on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. If you're on Instagram, it's Houston Home Team. It does come up on all those searches, but I pretty much pop up at the top, and I've been pretty good about getting rid of the imposters on TikTok. I had 8 for a bit, and yeah, you can kind of figure it out real quick. So it's the number of views and recent videos. If everything looks the same date, that's a fake account. So
Yeah.
yeah, so pretty much you'll see a year's worth of content on there spread out over a year. So
Yeah. So, and I would second that in saying if you guys don't follow James, absolutely go do it. He talks a lot about other stuff, not just IDX, so many other topics that if you're in the industry, so much value on his channel. I've learned a ton from listening to him. And he really opens your eyes because he's very articulate to what's actually going on. The other thing about that I love about you, James, is you do the research. You don't just speak like a lot of people on TikTok will just spout off at the mouth and have no idea what they're talking about. You do the research. So I know when I'm listening to you, it's an informed opinion. And I love it too because it's an opinion. It's not just a bunch of like whitewashed, nothing. So thank you very much. We're going to end this one today.